that the genocide against Israel has surely become much stronger.
Hi, everyone. Hope everyone's doing well. This is the Canadian Foreign Policy Hour. I'm Eve Engler, coming to you from Jojage, which has long been a meeting place of various First Nations, otherwise known as Montreal. And it's around the 160 something or other episode of Foreign Policy Hour, which is a critical look at Canada's role abroad every week. So it's a bit over 3 years, I guess, now. And so I'll get right to it. Story about sea ice in the Arctic, winter sea ice in the Arctic hitting a record low, uh, in an indication that the climate crisis is rapidly spiraling further out of control. And of course, Canada is a disproportionately large emitter per capita. The Globe, I believe, the business section, a big story about the first Quantum's Panama copper mine, highly controversial affair. They look like they're really moving towards reopening. They have this more business-friendly government in Panama that is open to this. And there's protests against it apparently already taking place in Panama. We'll see where that goes. It was considered to be the biggest protests in Panama, I believe, since they forced Americans to concede on the canal, that led to it being shut down. On a personal level and I guess a political level for Haiti, very unfortunate news this week. Mario Joseph, who's Haiti's most prominent human rights lawyer. He got into a car crash and died. Um, Mario was he came up a number of times here to Montreal to oppose Canada's role in the coup. I visited with him when I went to Haiti. I had one of my kind of more interesting or bizarre political experiences, or I don't know what we call it, political experience, media experience with him. It was participating in this interview with this community radio station in Haiti in Port-au-Prince, and it was like really hot, kind of I don't know, dingy office where the radio station was. This was back in 2006 or seven when I went to Haiti, and it was like so hot in there. We had like take our shirts off. And here you got Mario, who's this like prominent lawyer, like shirtless, doing this radio interview. Anyways, it was quite a an experience. Yeah. Anyways, he was really the leading advocate on human rights. Huge case there, the Rabato massacre that he led that case, and then after the coup, and worked with the Institute for Justice and Democracy in Haiti, and yeah, he came up here for the 10th anniversary of the coup and talked about Denis Coderre, the then mayor of Montreal, his complicity in it all, and terrible development for Haiti. Uh, yeah, so Mario Joseph passed away. Um, uh, on the Alex Ovechkin front, he of course just passed um, Wayne Gretzky in goals scored in the history of hockey, which anybody who looks at stats makes Alex Ovechkin far and away the greatest goal scorer in hockey history because when Gretzky scored his goals, there was substantially more goals being scored per game than there are today. And Ovechkin actually did it in one or two fewer games than Gretzky. Anyways, on the political front, the Globe today, in announcing Ovechkin's um, passing the record, says Ovechkin's new NHL record carries with it a Putin asterisk. And so they're claiming there's a Putin asterisk because Ovechkin was sympathetic or is sympathetic to Putin, and of course Putin is the ultimate evil. I did a piece a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, I don't know, when there was a story in the Globe, kind of similar direction about Ovechkin and the politics. And I basically just looked at the NHL's complicity in war crimes. So, for instance, Gretzky was a well-known supporter of Stephen Harper, prominent supporter of Stephen Harper. Of course, now there's a bit of a pushback about his support for Trump. But after Harper destroyed Libya in 2011, uh, Trudeau or Gretzky was there, really backing him. Uh, if you look at after the invasion of Iraq in 2003, the New Jersey Devils go to the White House 6 months or so after the invasion of Iraq, 2003. So this idea they have the Lester Pearson. I'm not sure what award it is, but they give it a Lester Pearson Award. The NHL does, and of course Lester Pearson was, as Chomsky labeled him, a war criminal for his role in the Vietnam War and specifically around delivering U.S. bombing threats to the North. Um, so this idea, this yeah, I mean, I don't. What I've heard from Ovechkin in terms of his explanation for supporting Putin is it's not very impressive to me. And Ovechkin's a sort of Russian nationalist with all that comes with that, I think. And yeah. Anyway, so this sort of the hypocrisy of it all of framing Putin or Ovechkin as close to pure evil, while Gretzky is okay, well, it's complicated. Harper, Bush, whatever, is just another indication of how it all the double standards in the dominant political culture. Um, there's Pierre Polyev on the foreign interference front. Pierre Polyev he went after Carney hard. Mark Carney, he said Carney is compromised by the authoritarian regime in Beijing. His company owes the Chinese state-owned bank $250 million. He protected a liberal candidate, an MP, who said a Canadian citizen should be turned over to Beijing for a bounty. So there's this real push. The uh, the guy out there in Vancouver, I'm forgetting his name, Terry Glavin has a big long piece in National Post. Beware Carney in China. That Tasha, forget how you her last name, has this piece in the National Post uh, saying so while tariffs are about the U.S. kind of frustration with Canada. So while tariffs are the stick and fentanyl the scapegoat, the end game for Trump is for Canada to clean up its act on defense and foreign influence. When your prime minister defends a member of parliament who has joked about turning over opposition members to the Chinese embassy, that sends the wrong message. She's referring to Paul Chang, the Liberal MP that stepped down, I think, last Monday after a real pushback on a joke he made. Um, so she's going so far is basically kind of suggesting that the real reason Trump's angry, he's not saying that, but the real reason Trump's angry with Canada, wants to annex Canada, is because we're too soft on China. And Mark Carney is the embodiment of too soft on China. That's essentially what she's saying, which is just like, honestly, comes across to me as like, this is quasi treasonous. I mean, come on, like as if Donald Trump wouldn't just state that if that's what his actual, like angry point is. Um, so it comes across as justifying Trump's attacks against Canada. The whole thing, I wrote a piece this week about uh, basically the Paul Chang dropping out and the backlash and the whipping up of the Chinese foreign interference frenzy that it represented uh, is it portends poorly for Canadian sovereignty, right? Because the whole China interference angle of things is very much a U.S. influence in Canada, uh, story. So the foreign interference concern is a real issue of foreign interference. It's just not principally Chinese interference. It's principally U.S. interference and all the different agencies of the Canadian government that are supportive of the U.S. Uh, but uh, but this the fact that even amidst the Trump annexation threats, there's still this really the Chinese kind of interference angle can get an MP uh, dropped is says a lot. And then on the notion of this sort of sovereignty, and this is the real issue. There's a piece that Peter Kent, the former defense minister in Harper, and a former Liberal defense minister, I'm forgetting who it was now, the name. They published a piece both in Le Devoir and I think it was in the National Post. It might have been the Globe. I think it was National Post. And it's a big long piece about the defense, kind of partly about defense relations with the US, and you got to put more money in the military is essentially ultimately what they come down to. But in this piece, they say that since the 1940s, Canada and US have signed more than 2,500 agreements covering security, defense, research, communications, logistics, and maritime uh, affairs. So 2,500. I quoted the Senate commission, a committee. I've quoted my book and I've quoted a few places. Forget the number they claimed in that one, but it was in the hundreds. At that point, I don't know. I think that was like 3, 4, 5 years ago. That was the hundreds that were active. So this is not all necessarily active. I guess some of them could have been discarded or time lapsed or I don't know what. But 2,500 of these different accords, just to get the sense of how integrated the two countries' militaries are. Uh, and of course, back to the whole China influence in Canada. It's really important to look at how much influence the U.S. has over the Canadian military to decide on how much import we'll give on the Chinese front. Uh, so this week there was a story. I think it was in the Saturday Globe where Poilievre's asked. So Marco Rubio says that the NATO countries are going to get up to 5% of GDP on military spending. So now they're starting to really push that. The US starting to push that, and some of the European NATO countries, I believe, have started kind of saying they might get that number. Some of the Latvia, the Baltic states, maybe Poland, I'm not sure. But so Poilievre was asked about the 5% thing. So now it's like actually seeping into sort of more and more. And I think Jolie was also asked about it. She had a kind of an interesting comment. I don't have the quote here, but she was like, basically, if we're not committed to the fact that Russia's a threat, then why should we increase our military spending? Was essentially her kind of response, which is an interesting one. So if Trump decides that Russia is a threat, then Canada might move towards 5%, is sort of what could be inferred from what she's saying. Poilievre kind of answered a little bit little bit similar, where we'll make our sovereign decision about increasing military spending. We'll do what Trump wants, but we'll do it in a sovereign manner. Kind of position that Jonathan Pettineau from the Greens kind of made that point to me as well, framed it that way to me as well. Um, in this piece on the Globe and in an op-ed, Wayne Ear, who was the chief of the defense staff until uh, maybe 6 months ago, something like that, late 2024, he uh, he says that we got to get above the 2%. So he's already starting. He wouldn't commit to the 5%. He sort of said, well, the 5%, I don't know. It's more about readiness and this and that metric. Wouldn't go just with a straight number. But then he said, yes, we have to be over the 2%, was what he said. And then he publishes an op-ed in the Globe. The urgency is upon us. We need to defend Canada. Now, in this op-ed, which he says this quote, the hard truth is that our comfortable social benefits now belong in the discretionary category. Our comfortable social benefits now belong in the discretionary category. As a father, I do not like this, but as a realist, I know that social spending is pointless if the country's future is in jeopardy. So they're starting. We saw a bunch of that in the UK, and now they're trickling in where they're explicitly raising, we got to cut social programs to put money into bombs and other military equipment. Um, so this is where that's going. Now I looked at ears very quickly today. His like past. So he's sort of saying we got to back away. We got to put a bunch of money into the military. He's kind of hinting that maybe we need to back away from the U.S., but not really saying that. Framing partly, implying partly with increased military spending because the U.S. is maybe sort of implying a threat, but not saying that. So I just looked at his what he did, and so he was like he led thousands of U.S. troops. He was in the exchange program there, I think at the Texas one. He led U.S. troops in Afghanistan. He was the first non-American, I think, since the Korean War. I think they said to lead the UN mission in Korea, which of course is basically the UN mission in the Korean War was just a U.S. mission. It's not it's like got some weird structure outside of the Security Council even, and sort of oversees or exactly the alignment with all the U.S. troops that are still in South Korea. Um, and so he's got this real deep like U.S. Connection, as do most of Canada's chiefs of defense staff, but it maybe even more so in his case. So the idea this guy is like a defender of Canada when his whole like military background was participating in offensive U.S.-led either wars or deployments is just kind of remarkable. But they all sort of use the moment to while they kind of hint at a crisis in Canadian militarism around ties to the U.S. military, they use the moment to push to jack up military spending, which is really coming across the board. I bumped into I saw the NDP bus. Well, I'll get to this a bit later, but I bumped into the NDP bus in front of a hotel downtown, and then on I think Friday morning, I went to try to ask Jagmeet Singh about the NDP committing to 2% GDP, which makes Canada's military spending hit over 80 billion from about 41 billion to over 80 billion by 2032. And he didn't answer me. The RCMP situation, the elections and the level of RCMP is out of control. But the NDP's even agreed to this, right? So this is where the 5% kind of stuff, the snowballs. We're not seeing anyone who's saying, okay, anything over 2% of GDP and we're out, right? Like, why couldn't the Greens say that? I mean, like if staying in NATO means we got to go to 5% of GDP, you can be a pretty like militaristic kind of person and still be like, we're not going there. We're not cutting everything just for military spending. And so if that's what it takes to stay to, be part of NATO, then we're out, right? That position at some point has to be even from like someone who's not necessarily going to critique NATO destroying Libya or NATO bombing Serbia or whatever, or NATO proxy war in Ukraine, whatever, just to say on a strictly social spending standpoint, there's got to be some NATO threshold at which if you're going to keep forcing us to go higher on, okay, we're out. But we're not seeing anybody say that, and that's part of why it's easy for Rubio and others to just keep pushing up, 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 and up. Um, there was a study or a poll from Nano said 60%, 62% of Canadians are supportive of scrapping the F-35 purchase from Lockheed. There's a story, the Journal de Montréal had a big thing, a couple page spread on Saturday about Quebec companies producing for the US and global arms. And they talk about General Dynamics, a facility here in Montreal, just outside of Montreal, and how they produce 150 different types of munitions. The different shells, specifically the 155 millimeter shells that are in huge demand in Ukraine. And of course, there was a contract that created a bit of a kerfuffle back in August, I believe it was, to 61 or something like that million to Israel via the US. And then that General Dynamics facility is also the one that the Project Plowshare, I think I talked about this last week. Project Plowshare has just found out that in September they got a $79 million artillery propellant contract. I think it's from the same General Dynamics facility. Anyway, so in the story, they say that that facility, they're putting $700 million into an upgrade because I think it's a really important, I guess, essentially U.S. Munitions kind of producer, mostly contracting to the Pentagon, and so therefore sending to Ukraine, sending to Israel, and elsewhere. MDA Space, the Canadian space company, purchased Israeli satellite communications chip company Satix Phi. MDA Space has an ad this week, a bunch in Political, and kind of all about um, its role in defense, security, protection of sovereignty, and the role space plays in national ambitions and industrial strength. And that's always been a big part. I talk about in the military, my military book, the role of space research and the mix of kind of like so-called defense and military affairs, but also in being a big subsidy to high tech industry and basically NDA Space is kind of in their is an ad in Politico that I guess they sponsor the daily send out by Politico, and they're essentially kind of promoting that of their role in sort of technological development and economic. It's all overwhelmingly it's subsidized. It's public money that's going to it. In La Presse story this week, Joly, Foreign Minister Joly, explicitly links the military to promoting the high tech industry. She says, I'm translating here, we have to be capable of using our Ministry of Defense as a way to invest in our PMEs, like startups, uh, in research and development. If whether it's in the domain of artificial intelligence, the domain of manufacturing, or other. So she's really like explicitly labeling out. And then she goes on to say that basically that's what the Pentagon does, and we need to emulate that model. And it's of course not a new thing. The first computers in Canada were funded by research, military research, and so there's a long history of that. Uh, I wouldn't, as far as I know, this would be one of the more direct quotes from a foreign minister, basically saying that military spending is a subsidy for industry. That's a little bit Julie's comments a bit more on the direct side of that, but it's something that's been widely known and widely done for a long time. The shifting gears to Palestine, the Lemkin Institute, which I don't know much about, but apparently it was like I think a Polish Jewish person post World War II that established it, and it's kind of become, I don't know, some sort of cutting edge institute in defining genocide or the like. And it says it condemns Israel, Europe, Canada, and the US for perpetuating genocide. Did a post. It was getting a fair bit of circulation on Twitter. I'm certain it won't get picked up by any of the dominant media. Um, this week or on Saturday, Bloc Québécois leader Yves-François Blanchet met with Erwin Kotler, and then Kotler endorsed um, Duceppe, Gilles Duceppe's son, the former leader of the Bloc Québécois. I'm forgetting his first name right now. I think it might be Yves as well. Claude. Anyways, he, which is obviously Kotler, liberal, endorsing a sovereigntist party candidate is a big deal. Whatever. I read this morning, and then I read it. I don't know, like 9:30, 10. I left the cafe. And lo and behold, I bumped into the Bloc Québécois bus. I was like on Saint Denis Street, not far from where I live. And it was just crawling with RCMP, just crawling with RCMP. Like it was so out of control. I was like, I was talking to these RCMP officers. I was like, what is this? Why are there dozens of RCMP? I should say Mark Carney, who I'll get to in a bit, but his bust, I is more RCMP than think I've ever seen, except for maybe the meeting between Trudeau and Emmanuel Macron, the French president. Um, it was incredible too. Anyways, the police officers told me that it was actually they were transitioning. So it was like the new crew was, going on break. I don't know, they do a day or two. I don't know how their shifts work exactly. And it was transitioning, so it was like double. But nonetheless, even once a little bit later, it was still kind of wild how many. And of course, they blocked me from entering the press conference, even though 3 weeks ago about 3 blocks to the north, Blanchet had a press conference. I went there, was there for half an hour, asked him a question of the F-35, and he responded. Even other media, English media, asked him to respond to that question in English. Anyway, so it's totally fine, whatever. But because the RCMP was there, they recognized me. They just all of a sudden, it's like now it's all danger, 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 danger. Just as exactly what happened with Jagmeet Singh at this hotel. Um, about a month ago, just after the day after I got out of jail, I went and Singh was doing a press conference here in Montreal. Went to the press conference, asked a question, he responded. There was no police, but now because of elections, it's just like police everywhere. Singh had a huge operation of police. Um, and anyway, I'm not able to get into the press conference, but I raised the matter with before the press conference as Blanchet's going. He's in a building. He's doing something in the building as he's going to the press conference through his window, and then as he leaves after I actually go home. I live like 5, 6 blocks away. I go home. And I wrote a sign saying "Non a Kotler" and on a "I love Gaza" sign, and came back and and did it when he was leaving, but the police are all over there, kind of block my ability to really see him and whatever. Um, but it's outrageous that the Bloc Québécois leader, amidst the Holocaust in Gaza, would meet with Kotler. I mean, the symbolism of that. And then he puts out a statement, he tweets yesterday, calling Kotler an exceptional individual who has done more for human rights than most heads of state. Incredible. I mean, like, how many have to be killed in Gaza? And Kotler has like been the most important Zionist activist in Canada for the last half century. And he can still be framed as this human rights, like whatever. And leaving Israel aside, Kotler's only human rights work is at service of US empire, right? It's always critics, it's always dissidents in Russia, China, Iran, right? It's not in Haiti, it's not in countries that the US is targeting where Kotler defends human rights. It's it's what's countries that they're targeting where it's like it's considered a hostile regime, hostile government in place. Um, but that's the state. So that, and it's remarkable because most Quebecois, I don't believe that they would be sympathetic towards that. It just shows you how the Bloc Québécois and Quebec nationalism has gone so far to the right. Um, the Maple has a story about the CIJA lobbied or sponsored trip for more than 58% of the incumbents running in the election. So they've either been brought to Israel by CIJA or they've had official lobbying, recorded sessions of lobbying by CIJA with those individuals, with those politicians. In the riding that Yara Sachs, who's a minister, I don't know what, is she still a minister in Carney, but she was a minister in Trudeau, uh, who's an Israeli. Uh, she is running against Roman Barber in I guess I don't know how a bigger proportion of the electorate are Jewish, but one of the most Jewish ridings in the country. And the conservatives, I believe, or some third party, but probably has to be the conservatives, I think, by the rules, they taken out an ad where they show a picture of Yara Sachs, who again is an Israeli. Uh, it doesn't seem to be fair to her. She doesn't seem. I mean, she's clearly a Zionist and bad, but she's not an Anthony Housefather. She's not as wacko as that. Um, uh, she in her ministerial position, she was on a delegation with Melanie Joly that met with uh, the head of the Palestinian Authority, who I'm just totally blanking his name right now, Abbas, and uh, and uh, and so they have a photo of her shaking Abbas's hand, and then Roman Barber is the conservative candidate, and it says Roman Barber and Pierre Pilev stand with the Jewish community. And then it says, I forget, I don't have didn't write the words down, but Sachs stands with the terrorists or something like that. So they're going really, really hard. I guess the calculation here is that a significant proportion of the Jewish community in this riding, they're extreme Zionists, and they think they can really paint the liberals as soft on terror and soft on anti-Semitism or whatever. Uh, on the note of the state of much of the Jewish community in terms of this issue, the issue of the Advocate Society, the law group that represents like 6,000 lawyers and judges and the like, that I think we talked about this last week. I'm not sure now. They rescinded the speaking engagement for their big annual whatever dinner to Haddad. I'm forgetting his first name. He's the Peace by Chocolate Syrian immigrant, and they're doing it because he apparently said he used the word genocide in reference to Gaza. And The quote that's considered his most controversial, Dimitri Lascaris looked at his Twitter for 6 months and found basically nothing on Palestine and Gaza. So in fact, if there's any criticism of this guy, it's because they said he's not challenged Canadian support for Israel. He's a big, huge Justin Trudeau supporter and has multiple pictures of himself meeting with Trudeau in the last 6 months, according to Dimitri. But the big controversial quote that is put in the Globe piece, it says, just looking at this is Haddad saying, just looking at this and thinking of all the children that we failed everywhere and continue to fail in Rafah and all of Gaza. This genocide must be stopped. Children should wake up to the sounds of birds, not the sounds of bombs. Time for this to end and be stopped. That's his like really intense quote criticism apparently of Israel. Israel's not even there. The word Israel is not even mentioned. That got him turf from this advocacy side. And it's this lawyer, Jonathan Lysus, according to the Globe, that's the main player, this prominent lawyer. According to Dimitri, he came here from South Africa as a 12-year-old, I believe. He apparently, this Jonathan Lysus, is working for the Israeli government. The Israeli government was his client not that long ago, according to Dimitri. And there's a piece that was written by God, blanking on name, Haven. Totally blanking on her name right now. First name about about the Haddad, the Israel lobby going after anyone, and I think they really downplayed the importance of basically, I don't know, the influence of prominent Jewish lawyers in the legal world, right? And this is an example where they basically, there's all kinds of broader contexts that strengthen the hand of Jewish Zionists within the legal world. But part of it comes down to that at the upper echelons in the legal world, there is a disproportionate number of Jewish pro-Israel lawyers and they have a whole lot of influence. And when they go at someone, so this Jonathan Lysus is he apparently sent some letter to the Advocacy Society calling for them to withdraw Haddad's speaking engagement. They know it has weight because twofold. One is that there's quite a few prominent Jewish Zionist lawyers, and two, they use the anti-Semitism stick, um, and it's kind of remarkable to see play out. Hopefully, there's some degree of pushback on the Advocacy Society. The incoming president has quit because of this sort of scandal that's sort of blowing up in their face a little bit. But it's 18 months into this horror in Gaza, where Israel is assassinating paramedics and just killing them, one by one, and then burying them. And then the video comes out of it all, and you got one of the guys like talking about being killed, basically on the cusp of being killed by Israel, and making a message to his mom about he just wanted to save lives, and he's being killed for that, and apologizes to his mom because of that. I'm sure the trauma that she goes through, and this stuff just continues on. It's completely. I mean, just it's hard, just totally impossible to get one's head around, to be honest with you. Um, on the note of so this week, it might have been right at the end of last week, but there was two different instances where there were in Vancouver and in Winnipeg. There was an IDF soldier in speaking in Winnipeg a Jewish Community Center, the Asper a Jewish campus, and then there was an Israeli consul who was supposed to be speaking at the Jewish Community Center in Vancouver. And in both instances, there was this pushback, and it was this like, how dare you protest at a Jewish community events? And the Carr, the liberal Winnipeg MP, called for bubble legislation in response in Winnipeg. And he does this thing about there's a school on campus on his ground. How dare you be protesting? And this whole thing. Well, the school, like I spent 15 minutes looking at the school's website and its Instagram. And of course, the school is like right up front that like Israel advocacy is like right central. One of their top, what's the wording they use? I don't have it in front of me, but one of the top, not requirements or objectives is like Israel advocacy. That's for the school from like junior kindergarten to grade 12. So you get the 4-year-olds going on the Israeli flags and whatever exactly. How do you get the 4-year-olds committed to Zionism? I don't know. But they got their different methods. They work on that, and then right up until the 12-year-olds or grade 12s are probably talking about joining the Israeli military in grade 11 and 12, some degree of inducement for and they talk about Aliyah and all that, going to Israel or emigrating or whatever. So the school being on the grounds is not a reason against protesting. It's a reason to protest at this Jewish Community Center. And the point, I'm just going to publish this piece making the point that all these institutions, the Jewish Community Center in Vancouver, which has a whole Israel engagement thing, as Israel flag, and does all kinds of Israel stuff. These institutions shouldn't just be protested when there's a consul or Israeli soldier speaking. They should be protested all the time. They should be protested all the time. And enough with this gaslighting. Enough with the gaslighting from the old poor, how dare you, these are just a poor cultural religious institution, how dare there be a protest, it's so unfair. They do this, and much of the pro-Palestinian world basically like indirectly kind of like goes with it, because and I get it to a certain extent. They respond by saying, well, what was happening there was an IDF soldier there or whatever. But enough with it. Like, yeah, that's a double reason to protest, but these institutions, we should be working to get rid of their charitable status of the Gray Academy, the school in Winnipeg at the community center. We should be working to get rid of all these organizations' charitable status. There should be regular protests at these different Jewish institutions that are practicing genocide. And a further point is that if they ever would have an IDF soldier or Israeli consul, a Jewish institution would have those people speak at any point, it is reflective of the fact that they are engaged in genocidal Jewish supremacism. right, is reflective of the fact, and that might not be the case with a library or a university, right? A public library university that has an IDF soldier, Israeli consul, they might not be, they, in different ways they may be, but they might not be, sort of deeply engaged in Zionism and promoting Israel. A Jewish institution, on the other hand, that would have those people is for good reasons. We know this is not, it's not like, fence sitting, just some, abstract public institution, whatever. That reflects the fact. And the reality is vast majority, not most, the vast majority of Jewish institutions in Canada are engaged directly in promoting apartheid and genocide. That is clearly the case. Honestly, with regards to the institutions, the burden is on them proving otherwise. The burden is not on us to say they are engaged. The burden is on them to prove otherwise because all of the evidence, it's gaslighting to say differently, quite frankly. All the evidence is in that direction. Not, again, I think there's some like Hasidic institutions here in Montreal that are exceptions to that. Obviously IJV would be an exception to that. But it gets down to some really few number of institutions where that's the case. On another kind of somewhat related thing. So, okay, I on Thursday, I go to the protest at 2 o'clock at McGill as part of this student strike for divestment. Unprecedented student strike at McGill. They call for a rally 2 o'clock. There's a few hundred, maybe 300 people marching. Wild, wild level of Montreal police. I got images of the full riot squad guys going into the engineering building, right? Like you have 40 or 50 riot squatters going into the engineering building, which is not a very big building. There's those old buildings, so it's not, anyways, it's pretty remarkable, just so flagrant. And so, anyways, I'm at the demo, rallies for a bit, probably about hour and a half. As I'm leaving, I'm walking down McGill College Street, and lo and behold, there's the Liberal bus. There's Mark Carney's bus pulling up to a hotel a block over. And I'm like, wow. I run over and people are still coming off as I arrive. So I'm pretty sure I was like seconds, maybe minutes, but possibly seconds away from actually having Carney come right down. And because it's sort of like chaotic, it's just there is so many RCMP, but there's all kinds of so many people. Like I could have just walked on the bus. The security clampdown or corralling that takes place later on, it isn't really in effect. It seems like I don't know. Carney wasn't there, so maybe when he was there, it was a bit of a different situation. But anyway, that was my perception as I arrived. And so, anyways, it's Carney bus. There's a lot of people coming down. I talked to some people. All the RCMP, they recognize me really soon. There's a sniper squad. There's stuff, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna hang out here. Hopefully, Carney comes. Maybe there'll be some other prominent political or other figures. Often the media is with them, so some of the media people wouldn't mind interviewing, whatever. And I don't know, 20 or so minutes after I'm there. Uh, I'm talking, I'm actually looking the other way. I've kind of gone down a little bit from the main door, talking with these three McGill students, just kind of hanging out, checking out the scene because it's quite a scene. There's a lot of those black I don't know what vehicles, kind of vanish kind of vehicles that the RCMP has. It's like they block the street for quite a while. Plus there's the bus. It's a pretty and there's a sniper squad. You don't see the sniper squad generally with Trudeau. I don't remember seeing the sniper squad. I did see snipers when Macron was there, but generally don't see that, and they're there as well. So the election has turned all the security things up to a whole other level. And so, I'm just hanging out there, kind of waiting, and then all of them talking to these two McGill students, and I kind of turn over, and Anna Gainey, who's a Liberal MP here, former president of the Liberal Party, she's like walking quickly, kind of like trying to cross the street. I turn around, I see her, and she's like a real hard Zionist. Okay, she represents a Western Anglo part of Montreal, the city, NDG. It's not a heavily Jewish neighborhood, but it's probably the I don't know the fifth or sixth biggest Jewish neighborhood of any electoral riding in the country. Possibly, I don't really know. I don't exactly know the boundary, but so 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 she's walking that way, and she's like signed a letter criticizing the ceasefire vote, right? criticizing her own government ceasefire vote, UN. She signed a letter with four other liberal MPs calling for the presidents of the universities to be basically clamped down on Palestine, brought before the House of Commons committee to, how are you treating your Jewish students? Da, da, da. She's on the Israel Parliamentary Committee. She's gone to multiple of these genocide rallies. And I went to her office like a week ago, and I tried hoping she was there. I didn't expect her to be there, and I just asked volunteers and whatever. And I've gone a couple things where I've been basically kicked out, trying to ask her stuff, not allowed in. Whatever. Now, so she kind of runs out. I have some difficulty with my turning my phone on, and I would say I don't run like a hunt, full on run, but I hustle hard to sort of catch up with her to get kind of a visual of me asking her about genocide. And as I asked a quick question about genocide, and she's moving pretty quickly. She's getting like on and off the street. It's kind of weird. And I'm asking her this question about the 15 paramedics, the aid workers assassinated, and she hits my phone, knocks my phone off, and then hits me again. She goes for a second. I don't know if her second thing was kind of on my arm, so maybe she was like trying to hit the phone. She wasn't sure if he hit the phone successfully the first time. Tries to hit the phone a second time, but she hits me. She's clearly like assaults me twice. And there's two RSMP that are like right behind who see it. And I talked to one of them about it, and he basically says, "Yeah, I saw it, and it was that's your fault for getting in her face," kind of angle. And so then I turn my video back on as she's getting into her car. It's like actually, which Alex Terrell tells me that he punched in the chat GPT, and it's a 90,000, 85 to $90,000 vehicle. Anyways, as she's getting into her car, I come towards her and I said, "Miss Gainey, why did you hit me? Why did you hit me? Miss Gainey, why did you hit me?" And she basically starts like crying. It looks like she's sort of crying on the video. And this is like literally from start to finish in is like 20 seconds. It's a really quick kind of thing. I don't know for certain that she knew I was there, but I would be stunned if she didn't know. All the RCMP knew, all the Carney's people knew that I was standing up front and like waiting, basically waiting for different people. So I would venture to guess that she knew, and I also venture to guess that the reason she went when she went was because I was kind of a little bit away and looking the other direction. She was basically sort of hoping to get behind me and off. She's refused all of the different Palestine groups in her riding to engage on the issue. Like the lots of effort. She just like shut down her like launch of her campaign because the Palestine groups like got word of it, and we're gonna the NDG for Palestine, Westbound for Palestine, we're gonna like possibly show up. Okay, now this is all kind of a background for this point, which I think is quite I think interesting point. So this Matthew Bedrins, who's this activist, long-standing activist, I think he's in Ottawa, been around decades of peace activism, anti-war stuff. He's been involved in, indigenous stuff, food not bombs type stuff, I believe. I don't know him personally, but I've seen his stuff, kind of whatever. Now, he posts the video of Anna Gainey where, and I refer to as Zio Tears, and she basically assaults me and then goes to Zio Tears right away. He posts this and says, basically complains that this whole thing's like sexist, and it basically that this is getting all this attention and it's so sad. It's getting all this circulation, and this is like the women's worst nightmare is to be attacked by a man asking things of her, and this and that, and just frames it completely from the lens of patriarchy, and to be most charitable to him, what he's saying is that like as a man, you have to understand that your position of power in a patriarchal system, that whether you want to or not, you could be contributing to a process that would push out women from politics. That's the most charitable and framing of what he's saying. And I obviously agree with the general point. I do not agree with that point of being applied to politicians, because then we're saying that like, okay, let's like not criticize Hillary Clinton because whatever, right? Because she's a woman and she can blow up Libya and do whatever, right? Okay, or we should let's be soft on Melanie Jolie. Okay, so I don't agree with that application for political affairs. I think as a point in general social relations, it's a valid point. but basically, what I find interesting about all this is that so Matthew Brethrens is taking this really hard identity politic kind of line and really centering the framing of kind of male power and male identity and whatever. Now, what Matthew Brethren is just totally ignoring is he's Jewish. Okay, so he's foregrounded in a number of places that he's Jewish, and framed some of his political action through the lens of my ancestors and this and that, and from some of the Jewish oppression kind of angle of stuff. And he seems completely like just unable or indifferent or hasn't thought about or doesn't care about the Jewish identity politic angle to this affair, to do with Israel, to do with a self-declared Jewish state, ethnically cleansing non-Jews from Gaza, using the stick of anti-Semitism to justify their actions. So now concretely, I believe that Brethrens is his anger towards me using the word zioteers is influenced by his Jewish sensitivities or his Jewish sensibility in terms of giving greater credence than is deserved, in my opinion, and I think most of the left at this point, to the sense of like Jewish victimhood on feeling like the victim and crying. I should say, as far as I understand, Anna Gainey is not Jewish. I assume she's Bob Gainey's, the former hockey player's daughter. I assume she's an atheist or some sort of Christian background. I don't know that, but that's my assumption. But Brethrens gives that kind of credence to the kind angry about the Zioteers kind of angle because he actually gives credence to the sort of Jewish victimhood narrative, which in my opinion is we're so far past that and it's become so irrelevant in the context of mass slaughter that it's just I don't know, you just basically have to get to the point of like being I don't care, I'm not interested in that narrative at all. It's just used to kill Palestinians, right? But he's clearly something not there, and I think the reason he wouldn't be there is because of his Jewish sensibilities. But I find it totally fascinating to see somebody engage in hard identity politics that seems completely incapable or indifferent to the Jewish identity politics and all this. And as a Jewish man in Canada, wouldn't you want to tread very, very, very carefully in exacerbating a situation where Judaism is being used to justify slaughter in Gaza and the like horror after horror. And like so what part of what Brethrens is doing is he's saying like as a man, I should step in with Eve as another man and say, hey man, you got to check the patriarchal some of that kind of politics that's going on. But I'm like, where's the Jewish people to step in and be like, Matthew Brethrens, check yourself, man. Check yourself. Like, do you not see what is going on? And like the use of Judaism and Jewish privilege and Jewish supremacy to just slaughter and kill and steal land and literally drive everyone out of Gaza. And you're not gonna like be like conscious of that when you operate in this now like everything he says is like basically, he basically starts getting to the point of lying about what actually happened in the specifics of the Gainey thing. Even if he was correct in what he says about what happened in the Gainey thing, which he's not, even if it was correct, like we've tried every day. He's like, we should go to her office, right? You should go to her office and campaign events. Like we tried that's all been tried like many, many times. So he's wrong. He's like just mistaken or quasi lying or distorting, maybe the better word, on a whole series of areas. But irrespective of that, just the sense. And now in his thing, Michelle Landsberg jumps in. Okay, Michelle Landsberg jumps in. And she like basically is supposed, yeah, this is like this is vigilante politics. A woman shouldn't be this is driving good people from politics. And okay, so she jumps in and Brethrens goes like 1,000%. Michelle Landsberg is like she's part of the family that's done the most over the past 50 years in terms of making the Anglophone Canadian left anti-Palestinian, right? She was writing op-eds when she was a columnist in the Toronto Star until like around 2000. I quoted one of her columns. It's unbelievable. She's saying that the Palestinians inoculate themselves worse than Goebbels and their Jew hatred. Right, like it's just as this is Zionist. Like today, even like Michael Levitt at Center for Simon Wiesenthal Center would be like, oh, I'm not sure I go that far. That's like hard. This was Michelle Landsberg. Michelle Landsberg, of course, is the husband or the wife of Stephen Lewis. Stephen Lewis, until a couple of years ago, was like pushing hard anti-Palestinianism. I mean, that was until like he's basically off the political scene. I don't know where he is health-wise. He's like not involved. Until the last days of Stephen Lewis engaged in public political affairs, he was pushing anti-Palestinianism. And he did that for 40 years. And his dad was even worse. I mean, this is really, and his sister was the lead person in sabotaging the Palestine resolutions at the NDP back as late as 2018. Right. So Michelle Landsberg, who now, like, she's been forced by the, political winds, right? The left moving on this issue. She now is like, I'm a member of IJV and I'm now, I'm not, supporter of Israel, whatever. So she's been pulled in a certain direction. But the idea that someone like Michelle Landsberg would have the gall to publicly besmirch challenging of Canada's a politician and challenging Canada's complicity in genocidal Jewish supremacism, and she doesn't have the self-awareness, or she feels the complete impunity for her whole history of decades and decades and decades of pushing anti-Palestinian racism. The fact that she would have the audacity to publicly comment like that, I find stunning. Absolutely impressive. I actually say it's bravo. I mean, like, wow, you are living in a bubble of impunity, of supremacism that you cannot even see outside of. And that Matthew Brethren is like activist, like a radical activist, would be like 1,000%, Michelle. Just totally outrageous, outrageous. Unfortunately, you got to get to it, and it's a really like unfortunate thing. But the state of self-declared anti-Zionist Jews isn't a good state. There still is a sense of just not understanding the scope of what's happening and the scope of the role of the Jewish community writ large in enabling, justifying, promoting, abusing the term anti-Semitism to push just an outrageous politic. And so just watching this and seeing this, and I think that again, this gets back to the identity politics, this sense of like where, I get it. Matthew Bresnan wants to step in as a man. I want to check that man, a leftist activist man from, engaging in patriarchy. Where are the Jewish people checking the other Jewish leftists in their promotion of like you can say, oh, I'm not promoting, I'm not saying bravo, Israel, kill more Palestinian children, but by centering your own sensibilities, your own sensitivities, yes, you are. That's what's happening. And it's pretty remarkable to see the quantity of killing doesn't seem to like affect that dynamic, which is pretty remarkable. Shifting gears to a more positive front, on the notion of maybe some degree of checking, though an indirect check, I think a more important, but more of an indirect check. A largely Jewish crowd. It's 100 Jewish protesters occupied Global Affairs office in Toronto, demanding a arms embargo. Uh, on Thursday. I mentioned the student strike at McGill. This was unprecedented. Student strike at McGill. I don't think that 3 days of striking. I don't think they shut down all the classes, but a lot of classes were shut down. Apparently, Jagmeet Singh, as horrible as he's been on Palestine and so many other issues, he apparently has signed the Vote Palestine thing. Out in Vancouver, the Sean Orr in the municipal elections, he won. I interviewed him. He was the one. He was the one that got the Selena Robinson quote, where she said that really racist thing in the B'nai B'rith, and it led to the minister in the NDP government in BC, Selena Robinson, being turfed. He won the most votes in the by-election. And the CJA candidate, CJA activist Jamie Stein got trounced by like 4 times more Sean Orr. And apparently B'nai B'rith was like pushing a like smear campaign against Sean Orr and like no impact whatsoever. So that's a good thing. And then the final thing is like the March on Ottawa on Saturdays. Buses coming from about 6 different cities, and people should, if you're in Ottawa or close by, try to come. And I will make Laura a co-host, and I will have sorry, I will, yeah, I'll let Yuri speak.
Thanks, Eve. As always, quite an epic show and so much going on. uh, well, I have. Well, actually, I have a question about the person who attacked you, but I'm going to save that if we have enough time in the Q&A. I don't want to take up other people who want to ask questions.
I went on a bit too,
But I do have
too long, so we probably shouldn't go for too much longer. But go ahead, sorry.
exactly. But I do want to ask this though, which I prepared, which is, can you talk about the Bloc Québécois foreign policy? Is it very pro-imperialism in terms of supporting NATO, the pivot to Asia, support for Rwanda and Israel, as well as no détente with Russia? And have they been proposing, like the Liberal Party, a hypothetical alliance with the EU and building up a European army, which would basically be NATO without the US? And are the Bloc Québécois, is their foreign policy more that they want to be aligned with French neocolonialism in Germany? I'm curious your response.
Yeah, I think that I haven't got, I did a bit for my left right book. I went into the history of some of the PQ and bloc where foreign policy, but so I haven't followed it closely recently. I haven't written about it recently or anything. But yes, there my understanding is it's all across the board. Blanchet 3 weeks ago, when I asked him about the F-35, he went, he started questioning the F-35, and at that point it was a step in the right direction. But as part of his answer, if you listen to it, he talked about like Ukraine and NATO and like sort of that being an argument why we need fighter jets, but maybe not the F-35. And like I said, he just met with Kotler and with the Duceppe son, the MP. Part of why Kotler is endorsing him is because he works with Kotler on Uyghurs, on the Uyghur issue, and he works with Kotler on I forget what the other one was, but another sort of like dissident group in targeted by Russia, or yeah, I forget, yeah, or Iran, or maybe I forgot which one it was. But he's basically Duceppe, Gilles Duceppe's son is a human rights activist, wherever the U.S. empire is targeting, kind of dynamic. And so that's a bit of the backdrop to the meeting with Kotler. So yeah, I mean, and I haven't seen anything on the military spending. I haven't seen them come out with the 2%. I haven't seen where they're at on the 2%. That's a little surprising. I haven't seen that. But I would be surprised if I certainly haven't seen them criticize the call for the 2%. And I would assume they're basically in alignment with that.
Okay, go ahead, Jake.
Yes, just a comment. Last Thursday or last week, the Zionists invited a few, I don't know how many, maybe 2 or 3 Israeli soldiers, murderers, to come and speak in a tour in Canada. And last Thursday, they were invited to talk in north of Toronto in a synagogue, to come and talk there. So there was a rally against it. On our side, we were about 30 people because there was another demonstration going downtown Toronto. But the thing is, and this is what I want to say, that on the other side, there were about less than 20 people outside with a desk to write the people that coming in and so on. And honestly, God, we hardly could see anybody going in. So that was phenomenal. In other words, maybe those buggers, those Zionists, they understand that maybe it's not very nice now to go and listen to some murderers or something, but hardly anybody was there. But there were 25 police cars, paddy wagons. There were more police there than anybody.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was the same tour, the Winnipeg thing, where there was the car, the Liberal MP complained about the protest. It was the same tour of these IOF soldiers. I think they did like 5 or 6 different cities. So yeah, it's a I mean, it'd be a good sign if it means if people aren't coming out. That's obviously a good sign. It's outrageous that there's organizations organizing these tours of the Israeli soldiers, and that there's organizations that, community organizations hosting the events. That's still totally outrageous. But
Okay, we have one last question from Yuri.
Yeah, very quickly, Eve. Apparently, the Sudanese civil war between the two factions of the military in North Sudan is winding down. I'm curious your thoughts and who is Canada siding with, and also there's been a brutal civil war going on with the Rohingya people against the brutal right-leaning military junta in Burma, which has co-opted a lot of Buddhist ethno-nationalists. And I'm curious, what has Canada's position been regarding Burma, both recently and historically?
well, I haven't followed it very closely, but my understanding, I mean, obviously Canada was involved in the ICJ case, no, with the Rohingya, I believe, right? It wasn't Bob Ray right at the middle of that, I believe. And So I think that that's, kind of the side there. I don't know enough about like what's going. It seems like it's a very brutal military uh, uh, government, and but I haven't followed enough to really know what the sort of geopolitics. I know there's some effort to try to like blame China. Not clear to me that like what exactly like China's role is in it in this, but and with regards to Sudan, I don't think that I don't get them like Canada brought some sanctions again. I believe against both sides, not that long ago, and my sense is that Canada doesn't really have much of a position on it. I don't see my personal senses is that the the military is better than the RSF. It's not like it's kind of like two forces that you don't really, neither are really good, but the military is a bit better. Obviously,
Not some question.
the military squashed the the democratic efforts, and that's what's really kind of sad thing in the in this. But it's not a particularly good, either side's particularly good, and I don't get this sense that Canada. I know there's different regional players like UAE, I believe, is supporting the RSF and stuff like that, and Canada has some relationship to UAE and stuff like that, but not a significant thing as far as I understand.
Okay, we have one last question by B. Sandhu. Okay, and this will be the last question.
Yeah. Hi, Eva. I just like to get your perspective on something that I'm kind of observing, but I could be wrong. And that is with respect to like the NATO and the 2% and so forth, and in some circumstances right up to 10 and beyond even. If you listen to some of the voices, there's a kind of a shift that is no longer necessarily about let's start a war here or there, but it's about sort of raising salaries and benefits for soldiers, but more than that, investment in R&D as a means to kickstart the economy vis-a-vis Trump's tariffs and so forth. So there's a kind of like a strategic shift. If you listen closely to some of the the defense industry lobbyists and others, I just want to get your perspective on that. And in other words, that if you were to shift, almost kind of like shifting the economy towards R&D and so forth, and have other outcomes that will produce other products and so forth. But primarily, it's the same agenda, but invest more in the defense industry. What do you think? Am I off, or does that make sense? Are you observing the same?
Did you hear that quote? Melanie Joly made that quote. Like I've never seen it made more explicitly. I certainly never from a foreign minister or even defense minister, totally explicit that we need to use the Department of National Defense as a way to subsidize companies and spur high-tech innovation and the like. That was straight up. The quote was in French, I believe it was in La Presse. But yes, I think that's true. I mean, the Germany stuff seems to be the clearest stuff on that, right? The Germany's come very explicitly. We're going to use like auto factories that have been mothballed because the auto industry's, being undercut by China or whatever. It's the economic downturn that we're going to use that to pump a bunch of money in the military. And a lot of this stuff coming from the UK is kind of similar-ish language. So I think that's a bit where the Canadians are picking up from. And then some of the stuff you don't like morally. You say obviously it's why do you have to do it through the military? Why can't you just, if you want to spur innovation, just provide money to universities and researchers and whatever to spur innovation? Why does it have to be via the military way? I think that's a little bit of an interesting question of how that is. It's like a bit of a political buying. It's a bit of a way of buying in, capitalist class, nationalistic, the institution itself of the military, and sort of having a whole kind of political buy-in to public spending that you might not get just in and of itself. Public spending. It's part of the lie of like free market capitalism. Yeah, we're free market, but we use our military for this whole like way of subsidizing corporations. It's all part of that lie as well. But yeah, I agree with you. I think that's happening, and probably we're going to see that pick up. Certainly, if there's any sort of downturn from some of Trump's actions, or just downturn in general. But it's like, so it's one sense you go, so like, well, okay, whatever, it's just an innovation that's okay innovation, but then it's still so intertwined with militarism, and it can help propel militarism to even greater extent, and yeah, so yeah.
Okay, I think that's it, Eve. Thanks very much.
Thanks everyone. Take care.
Ciao.